Meeting to order at 7 o'clock. We would like to inform all board member attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. This meeting is open to the public in accordance with Phase 4 guidance issued by the Illinois Department of Public Health and Illinois State Board of Education. Individuals are required to wear a face covering at all times while in the building, including during the meeting. The capacity of any room is limited to 50 seats and will be spaced a minimum of 6 feet apart. A COVID-19 screening is conducted for all attendees. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Here.
Mrs. Junk.
Here.
Mr. Carey.
Here.
Dr. Lawler.
Here.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Here.
Mr. Rivas.
Present.
Mrs. Witt.
Here. With 7 members present, we do have a quorum. Is there something that a board member would like moved from consent to new business? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Here. Or
Doc-
aye, sorry.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to board superintendent salutes.
Thank you. We do not have any tonight to publicly celebrate. Lots of great things going on, but nothing technically to bring for a salute tonight.
Anything from the board? All right, so we'll move on to public comments. I'll read the public comment guidelines. The board values public input to inform our decision-making and to provide information and insight into what is happening throughout the district. Board meetings are held to conduct the business of the Board of Education and are required by law to take place in public. However, they are not public forums. We use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. For that reason, the board does not enter into debate or respond to questions spontaneously or without proper investigation and deliberation. In most cases, concerns or questions requiring follow-up will be referred to the superintendent. If you are encouraged to seek a private appointment to discuss matters concerning individual students or staff members. I will call those who signed up for public comment in the order that they signed up. But there is the 3-minute limit for people who are speaking tonight. We're going to try using a timer to see if that's helpful so people can kind of gauge where they're at. So the first person for public comment is Amy Corbett.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
No. Little,
Is the mic on?
Are you a little closer?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, perfect.
All right,
Thank you.
Perfect. My name is Amy Corbett, and I live in Elburn. My 2 kids go to Blackberry Creek. Here tonight, just keep it respectful and share that we're all here to get our kids into the best location and environment to learn. I just want to say our teachers are the best, and they're loved by our kids. They're trusted by all of us to do just that, help our children learn. After this last meeting, I asked my son, he's in 2nd grade, if he could go to a school where he went 5 days a week, would he want to go there versus where he is today? He said he wants to be a knight forever. You have a child that enjoys school. He just wants to go every day and be able to see the rest of his friends. Just want to start out quickly and say the CDC guidelines came out today. If you're fully vaccinated, you can safely visit other vaccinated people in small groups of unvaccinated people. It's saying that if you've had your 2nd dose of the 2 current vaccines and 1 of the Johnson & Johnson, that 2 weeks after that, you're safe to be able to be there without, they even say without a mask or physical distancing. You can skip quarantining. So that said, our teachers this week are getting their 2nd dose, and if other obstacles are removed, like within the buildings and whatnot, they're safe to go back in person. Strong case especially to go back fully full-time in person in the fall. I wanted to ask, and this is a question hopefully you can answer throughout this, is where are the teachers who teach remote? Where are they teaching our students from that are remote? Are they teaching from home, or are they utilizing a classroom? I asked this again. You heard me in my last comment. My son's classroom does not have a window. It was never meant to be a classroom. I've asked in other conversations, what can the community do to help? And the answer that was given in the last email is you can continue advocating, or that you're continuing advocating guidelines, and that we can wash our hands, wear a mask, and watch our distance. What I truly meant by that, and I know I've got 29 seconds, is what can we do to help set up some of these classrooms, like in the old middle school, so that it can reflect the learning environment that's needed? Can we encourage educators who've retired or are stay-at-home parents today to come back? One of the things I found interesting is your agenda says approval to reduce staff. How could you possibly do that if you're saying we don't have enough teachers to be fully in person?
Thank you.
And my last,
Thank you, your time's up.
I understand that, but I
I
do
need to
have
move
some
on to the next
important
person
things
so
to
they
say.
have an
All right.
opportunity to speak as well.
Well, the last thing that I'll say is if there's other issues
You
with the
need-
cafeteria, the staff, admin, whatever, to open other facilities, that's where we do need to be really creative.
Okay, Scott Stoker, you're next. Oh, you pass? Okay. Chris Bateman?
I'm Chris Bateman, I live in Elburn. My daughter's in the 3rd grade. I'm going to read quickly since I'm limited to 3 minutes. 2 weeks ago, I stood here frustrated but hopeful. I was hopeful that after hearing how many parents wanted and needed their children back in school and why that was, combined with our desire to help in whatever ways we could, that we would start taking steps forward. Unfortunately, that does not seem to be the case. It was recently brought to my attention that members of this board, who will be remaining on the board this year, have aligned themselves with an article that states, in regards to petitions and protests and driving to have our children back in school, here's what I want from you. Just stop. In this article, it goes on to say that nobody is having an easier time, nobody is doing better than you, nobody is ahead of you, and nobody is falling behind. These are all blatant untruths. People are having an easier time for us because their students are back in school. People are doing better than us because their children are getting FaceTime with their teachers. People are ahead of us because the kids are again in school and nobody is falling behind. How can you say that our students being at home doing worksheets 3 days a week isn't putting our students behind these that are getting full time with their teachers? One board member has since deleted their comments on this article, but there have also been posts by board members stating IDPH is hopeful that with enough vaccine, referring to COVID vaccinations, October might be the sweet spot to start bringing more kids back on campus. Why would a board member be making statements like this? Where is the statement from the IDPH with this information? Also, the CDC's operational strategy for K-12 schools states access to vaccination should nevertheless not be considered a condition for reopening schools for in-person learning. Kaneland has pointed us in every direction possible as to why we cannot return students to the classrooms. But I've yet to have a conversation with anyone in the Kaneland district as to how we can return them, with the exception of, well, if the guidance changes. We have been told it's because of the ISBE, the IDPH, the CDC, the King County Health Department, even Regional Superintendent Del Santo, and the list goes on and on. What I do not think you anticipated was just how motivated we are. We have spoken with the ISBE, the IDPH, Kane County Health Department, Ms. Del Santo, district and state representatives, mayors, and village presidents. All of these offices, departments, and individuals have told us the same thing. The guidance is just that, guidance. But at the end of the day, the school board has the complete authority to decide if and when students return to the classroom. CDC guidance also goes on to say that physical distancing of at least 6 feet should be maximized to the greatest extent possible. K-12 schools should be the last settings to close after all mitigation measures in the community have been employed and the first to reopen. In-person instruction should be prioritized over extracurricular activities, including sports and school events. Finally, and I'm sure you're going to cut me off. You know what? I'll save this for later because I'm not done.
Thank you. Ms. Harner?
Hi, my name is Kim Harner. I'm much shorter than everybody else, so I'm going to fix this, I think, on behalf of everyone who can't reach it. Okay. My name is Kim Harner. I'm a resident of Sugar Grove, and thanks for having us here tonight. I want to mirror the first individual who was here speaking to say, we love our teachers. They're incredible. Thank you. And, specifically, my son he's in that category who had to quarantine the entire month of January. My husband got COVID. I got COVID. Then just to be safe, then there's that 14-day window. So we were out of school for 28 days. And what did we get? A lot of packets, okay? Miss Koski, she's incredible. She actually drove the packets to my mailbox for us. But that was the solution for somebody on quarantine. So I just wanted to share that. And so what did we do as parents? We quickly made a decision, called Aurora Christian, and in 2 days he was enrolled there. He was okay with the new teacher. He was happy to be in school full time. He's a happy child. Before that, he was actually asking me, Mommy, why don't you love me anymore? He was getting depressed. This is a 7-year-old. And Aurora Christian, as an example, they've been successful. They actually have their kids sitting 6 feet apart with no masks, and they've had no issues. They actually have bake sales on Fridays that parents bake and bring food and kids can go and buy it. They don't have issues. So when we say, look at the science, we can use science and data around us to say what schools are making it work. What schools are doing less than 6 feet? Are they having outbreak issues? Thank you for mentioning that teachers, now that they've been vaccinated, that is a huge piece of the puzzle. They will be safe. District Superintendent Del Santo actually said over 80% of our teachers got vaccinated. And it was not that the other 20% didn't, or it's not that the other 20% didn't have access to it, they just opted not to. So it's safe to say that those who want to pretty much will be fully vaccinated and don't have to be subject to the quarantine issues. Okay? Chris, your phone turned off, but I was gonna read a couple comments here. I can even just summarize them. On our Facebook group, Kaneland Go Forward, Parents United, a couple hours ago, I just quickly said, are there any statements that people want me to read on your behalf as I'm at the meeting tonight? And I'm gonna read those really quickly. And whoever's after me and on this page, if wherever I finish off, you can finish. Why don't I get to learn science? Evidently, some kids aren't learning science. That's actually really sad to learn, didn't know that. Mom, do we have real school tomorrow? Crying, Mom, I can't learn like this. 2nd grade John Shields, Mom, I learn way more in school than I'm at home. Freshmen, our high schoolers are being troubled by this. I have zero motivation to do any work. And last statement, that article, super offensive, that Ms. Junk and Mr. Lawler commented on and agreed with. And it actually said at the end of it, get in line, you're just like us, invisible and unacknowledged. Is that how you really feel about parents and our right to petition?
Thank you.
I stayed up till 2 a.m. writing that petition on behalf of these parents standing here, and you're
Thank you,
calling
Ms.
us
Harner.
indivisible.
Thank you. Ms. Sorrento? Ms. Sorrento?
Hi, my name is Tabitha Sorrentino. I live in Montgomery, and I have 3 children. One who's a freshman and who's struggling, misses her friends, and just wants that high school experience. It's mentally draining on her. I have a 1st grader at McDowell who wants to be in school every day. And then you have my son, who's in 4th grade, high-functioning autism. He wants to kill himself. This is how bad it's getting. My son has to be in school. If it wasn't for the outside sources, or Britt Mattern, or Natalie Warren, I really think my son would really take his life. He feels he's stupid. He can't do the work remote. This is wrong. We really have to think about our children. Because if something happens to my son, and I speak for every other parent whose child has special needs, you all are to blame. Each and every one of you are gonna be held accountable. Because of my son, I have to see him cry and have meltdowns and struggle. This isn't right. You have to use common sense, and you have to hear us out. I have been emotional since day one, seeing my son just deteriorate. This isn't right. You have to listen, and you have to listen to the parents. I'm I'm just so scared that one day I'm gonna wake up and my son won't be here. You have to wake up and just listen and get these kids back in school. That's all I have to say. These kids are dying, not only educate-wise, but mentally. You just have to listen. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel Rocco.
To do my best here with this mask and these glasses. Good evening. I want to start by thanking the administration, the staff, our teachers, and all of the board members for giving so much of their time and energy into trying to make our children's education experience special. Your efforts towards this noble goal will forever be preserved in the positive impact it leaves in our children. As I genuinely believe everyone has the best interests of our children in mind. I have prepared this statement due to the critical state I believe our community has been in for far too long, and because of this reason, I have chosen to be a write-in candidate for village trustee for this upcoming election. I believe the importance of our community has never been so dire, and in accordance with that, I will not be careless in hearing all sides and opinions to which the public holds. I simply cannot ignore the 85% of parents who desire to return to school, nor can I ignore the Kaneland Moving Forward call to action group that collected over 1,000 signatures conquering the fact that the taxpayers of this community wish to return to school. There is no school without its problems. Catering to the needs of the masses is a complicated matter for any group involved. However, the best and the brightest teachers show up every day and attempt to do exactly this. They are the ones who are attempting to bridge the gap for the children who may be struggling and trying to challenge the children who possess exceptional gifts in their academics. It is no easy task, especially with our society. Our world is structured in a way that we are completely dependent upon the education system. All children should be afforded the best and most efficient educational experience possible, for there is no greater freedom than knowledge. Our children should go through District 302 and leave it being fully competent and prepared for college, trade school, or what this world has in store for them. We know it is no easy task to maneuver through life. I ask you to consider the perspective from the economically impacted by this district's decisions, one regarding the decisions you might take for the plan to return to school. In this perspective, we understand that each village, the district rely on each other to attain success. As this is developed through the dependency of the district's rankings, currently the tax revenue that is generated by the village and the community members ensures top-notch facility, faculty, and programs, so as this village invests 69.2% of their hard-earned money, that they also invest in our children, which leaves us with the implied expectation that our children are guaranteed a great education. Our village's future depends on an action plan regarding the future of education in our district. Through this plan, the village library will need additional funding, our park district will have to have a field house, and the ability to expand its programs. Our police will need a larger building, and our fire departments will be needing new trucks in the future. Continuing to ensure the safety for our residents and the members of this community must allow that the taxes stay at a minimum the same and not continually increase. Our village and district must be unified in order to have these conditions met. The concept that
Thank you. You've hit the 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Grosinger?
I'm Tonya Grosinger from Maple Park. Good evening. At this point, most of you know who I am and what I want, so I won't tire you with those same comments. I do want to ask a few questions. I've been looking back on past board meetings, and on June 29th, the Return to Learn plan was introduced to the board by the administration. Deep into the comments, Mr. Carey asked if and when the board would take a vote on the plan. Dr. Layden then mentioned that it wasn't necessary due to the guidance. After some back and forth between the board members, it was determined no vote would be taken, just a special meeting in July to bring the board up to speed. It was also mentioned that when and if problems arose, the board could step in. Why would the board members willingly defer this vote? a vote that would probably be the most important vote any of you will have ever taken in your role as school board members. Just because the outcome may not change, it doesn't mean that your vote went for nothing. It's holding people accountable for what is going on in the Return to Learn plan. You chose not to do the job that we all elected you to do, and that's completely disheartening and inexcusable. And I sure hope the same actions don't apply when the next board steps in May. It was also mentioned that at the June meeting, the board would step in if there were problems. Well, why haven't you? We've all learned that this plan isn't working. We've all seen the grades per 2 weeks ago. Again, it's not being changed, it's not being fixed. Why isn't that part number 1 on your agenda ever? Lastly, last week, the 3 of us, Kim, Chris, and I met with Pat Del Santo, and she mentioned 3 people from the King County Health Department, Kathy Foster, Michael Isaacson, and April Elliott, that the superintendents of King County meet with. I got to speak to April Elliott last week, and she stated that while they will never advise against guidances, that districts are free to do as they see fit for their schools. She mentioned that schools had to weigh the options and choose what was best for them. She said she knew of some schools and special ed classes feel it's more beneficial to have their kids in class, so they take extra measures, such as masking with barriers or masking plus face shields. She never said must or you have to keep the 6 feet distance. She just said guidance and recommendations. Just like it's recommended that we don't need a bag of potato chips every day, but some people do. Where's the boundary? Is it liability? Is it fear of COVID? I'm not really sure what's happening here, but I do know that this isn't working and it needs to change now.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw?
Sean, what was the name?
Oh, Tim Shaw.
Tim Shaw, thank you.
Tim Shaw, Sugar Grove. Thank you for your time tonight, Madam President, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. I got to tell you, the last board meeting, that was something. I've watched it numerous times, time and time again, and I have to say, there's a few people I just want to pull out of that just for a moment, and of course, that's when my phone decides not to. Remember, is it Rivas? You got it right. You're asking the right questions. You got it right. It's hard to identify with masks on who's actually the one speaking. So you have to forgive me, I'm not very good at reading lips through a mask. Megan Junk, I have to say, other than what I heard earlier, I haven't been up on social media lately. I work and I don't have, I have a life with work and I don't do that all day. At the very last board meeting, you were so on the right path, but you were interrupted. You were right there and something happened and it just pulled you right away from it. And Aaron Lawyer, right? Yeah. Lawyer?
Lawler.
I'm sorry?
Lawler.
Okay, I apologize.
No, you're good.
That's why I was never a teacher, because I don't want to ruin kids' lives by mispronouncing their names. The point that I'm trying to make is, I read your bio, right, on Wabanzi, and it was pretty interesting to me. You mentioned something about how you were raised, and your mom told you to utilize creativity or something along those lines. The one that really stuck out to me is the fact that your father always asked you to question everything. And I appreciate that. And I think at the very last board meeting, there was a question that was brought up where you questioned the integrity of the survey. And I'm going to tell you right now, right off the bat, I do not fault you for that, because I really do believe the true intent of you questioning that integrity was led into something that I really don't believe you intended it to be defined as. All right, and I'll elaborate that in just a second, but I have to say, there was another part that was brought up at the last board meeting where they reached out and tried to find out how to identify how certain areas in our geographical United States, how they have dealt with pandemics or issues. How did Hurricane Katrina, how did they solve that issue, right? Here's the difference. I was brought up in Plainfield, right? Small town community. 1991, my senior year. I don't know if you're familiar, there was a big tornado that ripped through and destroyed our whole community, all right?
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. You can take yours. You got another 3 minutes. Look at
Congress
that.
rules, I'm with you, thank you. I really do believe, and I'll wrap this up kind of quick, I really do believe the board does have true intentions, but my point is, I think you're getting the wrong information here. I don't think, to a certain degree, you're getting accurate data. You know, I've watched the YouTube video time and time again of what happened in that last board meeting. There was a presentation that was brought to you with 86% of parents would prefer to come back. That is so irrelevant. How many of those surveys were brought back to you? How many kids are we talking about? Have we done an engineered study? I mean, really, if we want to talk about logic, take the square footage of this room, put a little yellow dot, just like these squares are, and go, okay, how many kids can we fit in this room? Then, let's send out a survey, give it to a kid, say, hey, bring this the next time you come back to school, here's your homework. You want to come back to school? What does that look like? Real easy. I think the response was it would take 3 weeks to gather that data. I find that irrelevant. I talked to a gentleman of mine, a really, really good friend. He's an engineer, smart guy, way smarter than I am. Said, you know what, Tim, if that was something you were actually interested in doing, I could bang that out in a weekend. A weekend, not 3 weeks, a weekend, if I have all of the complete data. If I know how many squares I need to fill in a certain square footage, I could do that in a weekend. The reality is, in my opinion, this has nothing to do with logic. This is all interpretation. I truthfully believe there's more things that are not being transparent. I think there's a liability. I've heard nothing but liability this whole time. I think we're afraid of lawsuits. And if you're afraid, there's no amount of logic I can give you. If you're afraid of a roller coaster, I can tell you everything about the safety features of a roller coaster. That's not going to overcome your fear of getting on that roller coaster, though. I can tell you there's safety measures, there's cables, there are all these other things. Doesn't matter. You're still afraid. And if the fear is a lawsuit, let's take a physician, for example. If you have a physician, your family practice physician, and he is deathly afraid of a malpractice lawsuit that he doesn't take care of his patients, how effective is that doctor? At some point, you need to look at this and go, what is our goal? Is our goal really the children? Because this is way bigger than the children here. We've got families that are financially in ruins. We have parents that are literally afraid for their children's lives. And I'm asking you, boards, please, please, don't listen to me. Hear me. Hear me. Let's get real data. If you want to if you want to dial in, if you want to do this logistically, ask those right questions. Otherwise, stop giving me more of the same, because I got better things to do. I mean, really, we all do.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're doing a great job, by the way.
Thank you.
Rock on. Keep it up.
All right. So we're going to move to the consent agenda. Tonight, the consent agenda consists of the following items. Approval of Treasurer's report, February 2021, approval of parameters for accounts payable and payroll, March 2021, approval of minutes of the February 22nd, 2021 regular meeting, approval of resignations, terminations, and employment of staff, approval of destruction of audio recordings from closed session meetings from August 2019, approval of Fox Valley Career Center joint agreement, approval of summer 2021 project bid results, approval of Kaneland Harder Middle School course book for 2021-22, and the following informational items: the Freedom of Information Act request report, student suspension data report. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to J1, approval of resolution authorizing reduction in force and honorable dismissal of non-tenured and tenured teachers.
Yes, thank you. With that, I'll ask Dr. Atkins if he would please come up to the microphone once he gets his presentation ready. They're the next two agenda items Dr. Atkins will walk us through, both requiring action. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Atkins.
Thank you, Dr. Layden. Good evening, Board. As you know, every year in March, the district needs to come and recommend staffing changes in line with Illinois State School Code. This year, after a large volume of work by our high school staff, we have determined through registration and enrollment that we will need to reduce in force 2 teachers and reduce in part 1 teacher, and that is due to student registrations for coursework and sectioning. We have Mrs. Ventrakaman, who is our CTE computers teacher, and Mr. Heinsohn, who is teaching welding. They will both be reduced in force, in other words, completely. And then we have Mrs. Deanna Cates, who will be reduced from 0.7 to 0.8 by 0.7 to 0.1 to do keyboarding. These are all honorable reductions and dismissals. What that means is that they have done a great job. There is nothing wrong with their performance. And if we do need to increase those sections, in other words, if more students elect those classes over the summer or more students move in and take those classes, they have rights to recall prior to hiring outside. So they get recall rights for up to 1 year within our district if that's needed. So with that, any questions?
Dr. Atkins, we have a bunch of visitors. Could you give us the whole background on why we do this at this time of year so that it's better understood?
Sure. Little bit of a history lesson. Way back when, in the mid-'80s, there was a variety of educational laws passed that required teachers to be released from their position 45 days prior to the last day of school. Common lore would say that the real impetus for that law was so that at the time, for a teacher to get a new job in a new district would require that they go out, they physically go to a district office, they look up job descriptions, they go back and type on a typewriter and fill out an application, mail it in, that kind of thing. So the state pushed back those timelines to give teachers enough time to basically find a new position. And that's for when they've been reduced in force. And again, a reduction in force is based on enrollment, registration, dollars, those kinds of things, not necessarily performance. So they didn't want good teachers to not have jobs for the following year. Over time, that has changed now. You can instantly see what positions we have available in our district. You can instantly apply. There's one common application through an AppleTrack program. So the timing of it seems off now today. Why are we talking about this in March? But it's because that's the way the law was set up 30 years ago. It has not changed since. So we are obligated to inform our staff if there is not the need for them the following year by March. So that's why we do this at the first board meeting in March every year.
And we don't know what's going to happen between now and then, and this may become moot.
Correct. We do have a variety of staffing patterns that you can look at where, because of the recall component, very often we're able to rehire our staff that have been released. So this is knowing what we know today, having to prepare today for August, those decisions get made and published during this time frame in the year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? So I'll entertain a motion that the Kaneland Board of Education approve the resolution authorizing reduction in force and honorable dismissal of non-tenured and tenured teachers. Is there a
So
motion?
moved. Second.
Thank you. And a roll call.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Jung. Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to J2, minimum staffing plan.
With that, I'll turn it right back over to Dr. Atkins, and he can walk us through this. Again, it's lengthy, and it's annually a lengthy presentation. So if you have questions throughout, please feel free to ask those questions to make sure we have clarity on all of the topics.
Well, thank you again. Thank you in advance for all of your support over the years with our staffing plans. We know it's an intricate and involved process, so we appreciate your time hearing us out. Tonight, you're going to hear the proposed minimum staffing plan. And so to start, we'll remind the board that this is a minimum. This is based on what we know today, and that there's always the possibility of adding to the staffing over the course of the spring and summer as enrollment, projections, classes, registrations change. We can change with that. And I would point out over the years, as we've had those hot spots of grade levels or student special education needs, we've been able to bring that back to the board, and you've been able to authorize an increase in staffing to accommodate those needs. So thank you for that. Tonight you're going to hear a minimum staffing plan in 3 parts. The first part would be our minimum staffing plan presented as normal, assuming a full 5-day in-person return in this fall of 2021. The second part is going to be presented given that one of the few baselines that we truly have this year would be to replicate the process that we have had this year, that we've encountered this year, with some sort of hybrid experience plus a remote experience. And so like we did back in the summer where we talked about what that would entail, you're going to hear a similar component tonight. And then third, you're going to hear what the variety of levers are that we would be discussing, monitoring on a daily basis, preparing for and be ready to address should those levers change. The first thing that we'll need to talk about, if this works, maybe, come on. Thank you, Mr. Raleigh. Maybe. Beep. There we go. First thing, we'll talk about our assumptions for the coming year. Please know that we do have an agreement with the KEA to try to maintain class sizes as close to the listed class sizes as we are able to. K2 at 21 to 22 students, 3rd through 5th at 22 to 24 students, everyday kindergarten, minimum 16, maximum of 24, and then middle school and high school at 26. This is a proposed minimum staffing plan. So please, again, remember it is the minimum and that there always exists that possibility to increase that staffing. Our baseline for this fall going into this minimum staffing plan does assume that 5-day full in-person return. Our overall FTE will need to increase by 0.7 due to new programming, sectioning, registration, special education needs, and enrollment shifts. As we have any insight to additional staffing needs, we'll of course bring those to the board. Additional FTE and changes will be considered, but not limited to grade levels, spans, or buildings. Student needs, state mandates, special education statutes, and the Kaneland Connects plan continues to guide our decision making. We do have a variety of special education guidelines that have to be considered and applied. We do want to make sure that we consider both caseload and total minutes as we look at our special education needs. And then what you'll hear tonight is that this will address some of those contingencies should the COVID-19 pandemic, gubernatorial decree, ISB guidance, IDPH guidance, CDC guidance, all those various regulatory agencies require remote options for our students. Next, Patrick. Additional considerations and impacting factors. Here we want to share a little bit of a longitudinal look at our staffing pattern. You can see that we've increased from 327 in 1819 to 336 in 1920, and then to 337 this last year. I want to make sure that I point out that in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and our need to provide remote instruction, we actually went from 337.74 to 347.74. We added 10 additional staff over the summer to assist us with programming due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It's important that we all remember that enrollment changes don't occur in pockets, so that there may not be substantive changes with just 20 kids at elementary. That may or may not equal a teacher. So for example, we may have 20 students of an increase at a certain grade level or a certain department or something like that, but when you actually play out where those kids are and what they're doing, it may not equal a teacher. Often I'll get asked, well, we went up 60 kids at the high school. How come we didn't add 2 teachers? Well, those kids are spread out across 4 grade levels, across 60 sets of classes, et cetera. So it may not equate to 1 whole teacher or 2 or whatever. We do monitor our Fox Valley enrollments, our kindergarten enrollments, and our early childhood enrollments. They are still tentative. Kindergarten roundup occurred a couple weeks ago. We had a good turnout for that. But as we do every year, there's still a certain percentage of families that weren't able to make it to that will continue to register throughout the year. Early childhood is a special ed driven program where as kids turn 3, they become eligible. So that always changes, and we don't necessarily know who those kids are until they become 3, and we seek them out through our Child Find program. And then Fox Valley does get registrants from all of the member districts in Kane County. And as we go through our process to have kids pick a first set of classes, a second round of choices, a third round of choices, all the other districts are doing the same kinds of processes for their high schoolers. And so the Fox Valley enrollment does fluctuate every now and then throughout the summer. As we look at our special education populations, please know that at the elementary level, our students with IEPs are declining by 16 students. The middle school is decreasing by 15 students, and our high school is increasing by 12 students. Again, just like we talked about the pockets, those aren't specifically 12 kids moving in. That would be the seniors moving out, added to by the freshmen coming in, gives us the net change. So they may or may not all be freshmen. They may be at different grade levels, et cetera. At this time, student enrollment is projected to increase by 13 students early childhood through 5th grade. And again, that's across 4 buildings and across all 6 grade levels at those buildings. The middle school will see a decrease of 65 students in the fall, and the high school will see an increase of 26 students next fall. We do continue to track and monitor all of our students who enrolled throughout the year due to COVID. So it's important for the board to know that these projections that we're sharing include those students who have left us, as we do anticipate that with a 5-day full in-person return, we will reclaim many of those students back to us. So these numbers in the minimum staffing plan takes that into account.
Chris?
Yes, Peter. Mr. Rivas.
We have a large class. Is that the one going into freshmen?
Yes.
That's why the big variance.
Right.
All right.
So our last, and thank you for reminding me of that, Mr. Rivas. The last large cohort of students that we have are going to be freshmen next year. So that bubble is now matriculating all the way through K-8. They will go through the high school over the coming 4 years, and then we will see those class sizes of decline coming through the system.
And we typically lose about 30-ish to private schools? That's reasonable?
Correct. To private schools.
Just trying to do the numbers here. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Next slide. So this just, whoops, back one, enrollment projections. So this lays out where you can see the students by grade level. Early childhood, we continue to use 80 as our placeholder. Again, with those kids coming in as they turn 3. Kindergarten through 5th, you can see the 1731. The middle school you can see going down, and the high school you can see going up just a little bit. After we add in the current 9th and take out the next year's senior, or this current year's seniors, we're up just a little bit at the high school. So overall, as a district, we're down 19 students. Okay, next one. The board has always asked to know what the elementary class sizes are, and so we present you information of what they are over the prior 4 years, and then give you those averages, so you can see the averages by school and then by year across the bottom. It's important to know that these are hard count class averages. In other words, these are actual students divided by their actual teachers to give us these averages. You may have independent classes or individual classes that are a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but these are the averages. And it's important to know that if you were to look at the Illinois School Report Card, you would see different numbers. You see different numbers because the state of Illinois would include special education staff, support staff in the divisor. In other words, they would divide the number of students by more teachers than this shows you. This is what we would actually have as our class size averages by building when you just look at the elementary classrooms themselves. Okay? So just another data point that the board has asked for over the years.
Dr. Atkins, how
I'm sorry?
does the remote learning or the percentage of our students that are completely remote affect these numbers?
They wouldn't, in that we have the total number of kids for those sections divided into this.
Let me try again.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got a classroom of kids that aren't actually in any building, right? So we've got a remote session of, I don't know, third grade. Is that still counted in this average of the kids in the building for Blackberry Creek?
This would be, yes, so we would add up all of our students, for example, first grade, second grade, all those for Blackberry, we'd add them all up, divide by the number of teachers teaching them to get that average.
Okay, so this includes the remote kids too?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get
Yep.
to. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so our next slide shows where we're at with our elementary FTE projections. We increase in third grade by 2 sections, and we decrease in first grade by 2 sections. So we have an overall flat staffing at the elementary school. And there are some specific grade levels that we'll talk about in a few minutes that are hot spots that we're monitoring. So overall, we're going to be looking pretty solid at the elementary school. Mr. Rowley, if you want to go to the next one. This is our middle school projections. You'll see we have a decrease in our special education population at the middle school. We had a large 8th grade cohort that's going to the high school. So those students will be serviced at the high school as freshmen next year, and they don't need to be serviced at the middle school, so we're down 1 FTE there. Then we also have a retiree and a resignation at the middle school. So we're going to realign some of our sectioning, so that way we have a 5-person team and 2 4-person teams at each grade level. Okay, so we're down 2 FTE at the middle school. At the high school, you can see where we have a lot more of our fractional FTEs. That's because we have kids register for classes. We might need 10 Algebra 2 classes one year and then 13 the next year, and that may not be an actual full FTE, but a portion of an FTE. So as we do the scheduling, a special thank you to Mrs. Faber and Mrs. Oslager and Mrs. Maris at the high school for spending weeks and weeks and weeks putting this together to let us know that overall they'll need that 1.3 FTE at the high school. But if you recall at the beginning of this, I said that we would increase our FTE by 0.7 because that other fractional FTE is covered internally with teachers shifting what they're teaching. So for example, you might have a multiply certified teacher who teaches a science and a math class who's going to teach all science next year, or vice versa. You might have a PE teacher who's teaching PE and then an English class, and they may teach more English and less PE the coming year. So we're able to match up our staff to the enrollment and registration that we have and make sure that we cover all of our classes that way. Questions there? Okay, next one. This shows our total staffing full-time equivalency by type. So you can see that we have our teachers, our support staff, our administrators, and our total FTE, and then a difference. I put a couple of asterisks up here so that you know. First of all, that far right column is projected. Secondly, the second row, the support staff row, that is something that we get to in April. So those are the numbers as of right now, but they may be subject to change come April, but that's when their staffing pattern occurs. So we're not able to speak directly to that today, and we aren't typically able to speak to that in March. That comes in April. And then the triple asterisk is in that 2021 column because I wanted to make sure that we showed the difference in our staffing based on the FTE required for the remote instruction that we provided. So you can see basically we had those 10 additional FTE built into that 2021 column for you. When you look at all of that, all in, we're at a plus 0.7 FTE. Okay? So, overall, based on that minimum staffing plan, assuming 5 days a week, full days, we have a flat staffing projection for elementary. We do have a first and second grade at Stewart and a second grade at Shields that we are monitoring closely due to elevated class sizes, like we've done every year. And when we get to the point where we'll need another section for that, we'll come back and talk to the board about that at that time. Middle school staffing is down 2.0 due to the smaller class sizes and IEP needs moving through the system. High school staffing is up the 1.3 FTE. Remember though, with the changes of what teachers are assigned to, it's truly 0.7. We are going to ask that we maintain the teacher on special assignment for our one-on-one initiative. This was an approval that the board made back in March of 2019 for 2 years. We recommend that be extended for another 2 years. That has been an invaluable position for us as that teacher is responsible for assisting teachers with Canvas, Tyler, Zoom, how to work with this digital world that we're in this year. And frankly, we all owe her a great debt of gratitude. So we'd like to continue that position. Our district administration staffing is flat from last year. And then, of course, as we lead into the next couple of pieces, we're going to be monitoring all the various components that are presented to the schools throughout the spring, summer, and should any of those levers that we'll talk about in a few minutes be adjusted or changed, we'll come back to the board with revised plans to address those differences.
Chris, why are you thinking the TOSA for 2 years? Just why make that decision now?
Stability and continuity of programming, the ability to help us as we transition from where we are right now to where we will need to be post-COVID, hopefully, as well as looking at the personalized learning academy construct that we've been talking about and preparing for. Our kids are digital natives. Our teachers may not be, and they need to know how to work with this new media, not new media, but a different media for them as they're teaching our kids. It's a completely new world out there for them.
It just seems like we don't make many decisions for multi-years, so I guess I'm just kind of wondering now, just not knowing what other things will come up, if that's, something that should be made now. I don't know. I guess that's kind of sitting odd to me. But good. I don't know if the other board members think the same way.
I'm glad it's helping.
I know, it is great, it's helping. It's not, I just wonder about priorities and if they change.
Sure. The long-term strategic planning that we can bring over multiple years is what will allow us to provide things like professional development opportunities, specific training opportunities for our staff. That's hard to necessarily do over the short term because this is a long-term need.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we can control, right? Like this one we could control. We rarely can control most of our staffing plan. But this one we could plan for, right, and budget for. So it might be a good justification for it.
Correct. I do believe that the need for support with our digital instruction strategies isn't going to go away anytime soon.
Right.
In one capacity or another. And so how do we best help that, provide for that, and ensure that our students get the best thing from their teachers by having the support like a teacher on special assignment for the one-on-one initiative.
I'm with you, Sean. I get it, right? We don't usually plan that way, right? Yeah.
Especially since it's still in as a temporary, instead of a, it's a teacher that will need to go back and find a spot in the school at some point as well. I'm just curious what the thinking was with that.
Is the special assignment set in stone? Does it have to be digital stuff? Like if we got to a point where, because everybody's doing the digital stuff now and they're getting pretty good at it. And could they be on special assignment for something else? Do we have flexibility in assigning them to something else?
They could. And I would anticipate the need. Right now, I think that there is initial need being met, where teachers are still learning to become familiar with some of the digital media that's out there, and this person's helping with that. But I think that over time, that will shift away from, okay, how do I access it? How do I, get it to do this or have this functionality? And will shift into the more cognitive coaching component of how do I actually design instruction utilizing this tool now? Right now we're learning how to use the tool, but eventually it will become, okay, now I've got this tool in my pocket. How do I fit it in with all of the other lesson design that I'm doing with my students? How do I flip classrooms? How do I engage in information? How do I have the kids engage differently with utilizing this kind of technology? So I could easily see it shifting and evolving over time. Okay. All right, so the next piece, we talked about 3 parts of the minimum staffing plan. This would be the second part. This year we had to provide remote instruction to our students. And in doing so, that presented a variety of scheduling and staffing issues in terms of, again, think about that pockets. At the beginning of the year, we had no way of knowing how many first graders from which buildings were going to want remote, how many second graders at the high school level, who's going to be out for what, who's going to need remote instruction for what. So we presented to the board a contingency plan to provide an additional allotment of dollars to use incredibly judiciously to provide for those instructional needs for our students. And so right now today, that's really the only baseline we can look back on with the remote structure. So we're asking that the board approve that on a similar allotment, again, judiciously used, monitored carefully, utilized judiciously, so that we can provide for instruction should that continue to be a need moving into the 21-22 school year. So we talked a little bit over the summer how long-term subs could be used, what we would pay them, long-term substitutes for paraprofessionals, what we would pay them, and then a full-time temporary teacher and what we would pay them. So we're asking that we take a look at that and provide for that should that need come up, so that way we can get right to the planning and implementation versus coming back to the board to discuss the potential of a remote option.
I think that one for me as well just feels like there isn't the substance behind it yet. Because I think you have had now experience of the cost of running 2 models at the same time, and I think to your point, it probably is $725,000. But it just seems like so many variables are still up in the air as well going into next year. I don't know if it's better to put a pause on that until there's more specifics, but
I don't feel like an additional $725,000 is part of a minimum plan. That
Right.
seems to be part of Plan B or C or
Plan B.
D. So
Yeah.
personally, I don't believe that this should be in there right now.
But what's the issue of asking for this later?
Expediency, being able to get into the implementation phase of it.
Does it slow you down your search process? Is it like what are the hurdles that you're going to face?
Well, I think there's absolutely a concern about the candidate pool, posting positions, hiring positions, having the positions be accepted, onboarding people. We do those things as quickly as humanly possible.
Right.
And at the same time, what I wouldn't want to do is create a barrier to starting that process. So, and I recognize that it is a contingency, a Plan B, but it's one that when we look at the sum total of what we do know, we know how it worked this year when we were required to do some sort of in-person hybrid with a remote. So it's the base component that I can bring to the board to say, if it looks kind of like this, this is kind of what we'll need. I understand that we don't know that we need it yet, and if we don't need it, it wouldn't be spent. It's not approved and...
it's not that it wouldn't be spent, it's
Right.
how it would be spent.
I'm sorry?
It's not that it wouldn't be spent to me, it's how it would be spent.
Correct. And we don't
that's
know
to me
enough
the
of those
question.
levers yet.
Yeah.
So I guess we're all under the assumption that we're planning on a 5-day kids back in school staffing plan next year. This is a whole different plan that we don't have detail, and I know you don't know the details because you don't know what the rules are going to be to make the plan. So I would much rather wait on this portion of your request until we have a better idea of what those rules are going to be, personally.
Would a compromise be an incremental allotment, like at the beginning, like now we would do a third or whatever everyone might be comfortable with, like so that it does free up for some of those things, but it doesn't make us uncomfortable with just saying, because we had to do it before, we're going to do it again at the same level. I mean, I think that's where my discomfort is.
Any consideration would be helpful, would help us expedite the process for posting and hiring. So if it's a portion of it, that would be helpful. If it's something that the board reaches consensus and is not comfortable with any of it, we would then bring all of it to you with the identified position. So we can truly work with either of the options or all of the options, but if there were something in there that is a contingency at a lower amount, that would be helpful in the short term to make some quick decision-making as needed.
Would it be kind of building on Teresa's idea, would it be possible to put more restrictions on this? Or actually, it's really Shauna's idea, right? Because you were worried about how it was spent. So can we put more limitations, like this could only be used for contingency plan B in the effect we get into, X, Y, Z or whatever?
But we can always call a special meeting and meet within a couple, I don't know what the exact time period is, a few days.
Yeah.
If the rules change, they can tell us they need the money, we can have a meeting and approve it. Right now, we don't even know what we're approving.
Sure. I do worry about that idea of calling a special meeting because it doesn't, it's difficult to coordinate that, right? And so it's not necessarily like, we're going to call a meeting tomorrow, right?
Okay, so would they
You
have
only
to wait
need
2
4 of
weeks?
us.
Pardon me?
You also only need 4 of us.
Yeah, you only need 4. Well, I would think we would want to have.
Yeah,
So this
I
is
mean,
the
we don't
same
want to be there, but,
minimum,
if it was really, truly an emergency and there were conflicts, we only
Sure.
have to
So a
have.
couple of things. Historically, this is the same number that we approved for this year, right?
Right.
Because we gave you the flexibility for Todd to do whatever you need to do to get us through COVID for this
I
year?
just want to clarify, when you say the same number of this year, you're talking about the 725 or the
725, yes.
bigger? Yes, the 725
All
was
right.
correct.
So, all right, so that's where that comes from. Now, Ryan, if you remember 2 or 3 meetings back, when we were talking about budget, we were talking about COVID, it didn't look too promising. Things are changing. You and I told them that we need to look forward and potentially having that in there. So I can appreciate where that's probably coming from. Things have changed, I agree. To what point, we don't know yet.
Right.
But you and I actually pushed for this.
Push for it in the budget or
Push for
push
the
for
To
it?
push to carry forward the potential of we may have to continue doing this. The COVID stuff, the remote and what have you.
I don't
So
disagree, but I don't feel the sense of urgency either
You
to
just
approve
plan.
it tonight. I mean, we don't know what the rules are going to be come August 11th.
Yes.
We hired all of that staff in August and September, or I'm sorry, July and August.
July and August.
Don't quote me on the dates. We've made this change before and had to pivot before. We don't need to start tonight planning for what we're planning for all the kids to go back to school as of right now. And if that changes, we can sit down and talk about it and approve whatever money that they ask for and we feel is necessary.
Which is
Doesn't
what-
need to be
Which
tonight.
is what it was at the beginning of the year. And we kind of, that's what he asked for whatever number it was, and then we just said, go, get it done.
I'm not following you, Pedro.
But this motion's to approve that expenditure now, right?
Well, and I don't disagree with you that we did pivot, but how easy was that pivot? I think that's part of the issue, isn't it, Chris? Or am I wrong? Dr. Atkins, sorry.
That's okay, to a degree. The candidate pool decreases as you get closer to the start of the school year. The timing becomes more and more critical. In addition to that, you have to know, you have to find the right certifications for what you're planning for remotely, et cetera. So I can tell you we will always do our best and we will always try to get it done in that time frame, but know that this last year it was tight. It was very tight.
Right.
So where I was going, Ryan, was the fact that,
Sorry.
no, it's fine. The fact that this year, we authorized the 225, use it wherever, whenever you need to do it. And as a matter of fact, last time, or the previous meeting, you were using the 65,000 to help those children during the summer to do the one-on-ones or whatever, those are falling behind or what have you, or have fallen behind more than others. So they have been piecing it through, in which, now is this what, the numbers you have right here, total 100, if I did my numbers right, 110,000, that's where you're at presently with that 725? Is that, am I doing the numbers right here?
Right now you have 0 for that 725, right?
No, Dr. Fuchs can get us the exact number if we need it.
No, what I'm talking about is the sheet that you have on the board here. You have the 725, and then I add the numbers on the bottom. Those are equal to 110. The long-term substitute, 26,000. The long-term substitute for parapro, 14,000. The full-time teacher, 60,000. Those numbers actually add up to 110.
There's not quantities associated with them.
No, that's just the base rate that we would pay those positions.
Okay,
So for example, this year,
that's not a
we had to
request.
hire several teachers to teach some of those remote sections, or to teach sections that were in person, that in-person teachers were transferred to teach remotely because of certifications or whatever. But then we also had to hire long-term substitutes to monitor some classes that were being taught remotely by teachers who were assigned to home. So we had a variety of those expenses. Somebody mentioned quantities. We had different quantities of teachers, substitutes this year to cover all of those needs. So that's where that cap at 725 came from. We did not spend the entirety of those dollars. I do believe that that's accurate. By how much, I'd have to go back and do the math with Dr. Fuchs to share with you. But I do know that we didn't spend all of that. But to have the latitude to be able to get all of the pieces covered that we needed to get covered, that was what was critical. And that was what was our work the entirety of the end of June and the beginning of, or July and beginning of August.
So what you're saying is we potentially would be using it in this fashion. And what you're asking for us is to give you that flexibility if this happens again, to do this. Hence, you're not actually saying let's spending the money already. You're kind of getting ready just in case. It doesn't say you're gonna spend it as well. And again, several meetings ago, I was one of those that said, yeah, I think we need to consider.
Correct.
Things have changed.
And part of that too that we've discussed along the way tonight, and that we'll continue to share as we talk about that third facet of the minimum staffing plan, is that as those changes become known to us, they will be brought to the board to be discussed more in depth of what that impact that has on our staffing and on our instructional programming.
Okay, so what kind of timing do we, can we expect to hear of any COVID relief money we might be getting? Because there was some,
The federal.
legislation just was passed, and I saw that Illinois is getting $5 billion for.
Yeah, and some of it
public
was supposed to
schools.
trickle down to the school districts, the split it, I don't know.
And I know, I mean, let's just, for the sake of this argument, let's assume that money is going to trickle down to the school districts and they're going to get it. We wouldn't need to allocate the 725 necessarily. I mean, where is this what's the source? When would we know when we were getting the other money? I'm looking at Dr. Fuchs because she's the money lady. So that we would know, because we have like 6 meetings between now and the beginning of the year, 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And so if something changed, in May and we got the money, I mean, this might all look different to us. So I guess I'm wondering about that timing. And then I'm also wondering, President Sparber, how we move forward from this item. We're going to have to make a decision here.
That's a good point, though, Teresa. A very good point. That potentially we have some funds coming at us. Even this year, we had some funds, right? I don't know if it's a grant or was it how it got to us as well.
We've had 2 rounds of the ESSER money. That's, I believe, the money that you're talking about, the federal money. The first one was a little over 100,000. I think it was 153, maybe. That is all spent. And then the second round, we need to develop our plan on how we're going to spend it, and it's a little over $500,000. And we're meeting on that, I think, in 2 weeks, basically, to figure out what that plan is. Once we submit our plan, we can then submit our expenditures for that plan, and it can be spent up this year and next.
Okay,
So-
there you go.
Does that require board approval,
No.
your plan? No, so.
And some of the grants specifically are not allowable for staff, and some are. But as we get that information, we can always evaluate that and then share that with our board also.
Most likely, we won't want to spend this money on staffing because there's an extra federally funded amount that we have to pay on it. And so we try to spend this money on something that's not staff related so that we can save the district money where you don't have to pay the extra, I think it's almost 11%. That way you can get the full use of the grant monies. So you have to strategically plan for your spending for those dollars.
So should we let Dr. Atkins finish his presentation? All right.
Thank you. So the next portion of our minimum staffing plan involves all the things that we don't know. And I want to make sure that we talk with the board about those various levers that may get pulled by whomever, all the various regulatory bodies and governing agencies, et cetera, that will have an impact on how we staff our schools. The first one is social distancing guidance. 6 feet, 3 feet, 0 feet, all of those things have an impact on what our staffing would look like, what our space utilization would look like, what our materials would be needed, what materials would be needed, et cetera. And so we are watching that one. Space capacity limitations. Right now we're capped to certain numbers of people per certain spaces, and that is a significant limitation to some of our core functionality. So how that changes is something we're monitoring on a daily basis. Remote instruction. This year, the Illinois State School Board required that remote instruction be an option for our families. Will they continue to do that? If they don't, will individual boards of education choose to continue to offer remote instruction moving into the future? And so there's some variables there that, as we hear from the state, we'll be able to make decisions on. The Restore Illinois phases. Do we have guidance, or is it are we in phase 5 by the time the next school year comes along? Timing of the guidance. There's multiple, and I believe there were a couple questions asked about the staffing pattern and posting and hiring. There is a lot that goes into hiring educators, and so do those timelines overlap with how we staff, how we apply, how we post, how we get applicants, how we interview, applicant availability. Like I mentioned earlier, the closer you get to the school year, the smaller the candidate pool becomes. Release timing, like we're doing now. You know, we have to let people go by a certain time, and when we get to a certain place in the school year, are we hiring full-time teachers that are temporary or not, et cetera, long-term subs, posting requirements, and then any other unknown or unpredictable guidance and/or requirements for opening. As it was pointed out a couple different times, we did get evolving guidance throughout last summer, and we had to make some significant changes at the last minute, and it is right to prepare for that possibility and monitor that on a regular basis. So as we get clarification on any of these factors, any of these variables that we can then define and plan for, we'll be bringing those concerns to the board. We'll be talking with the board about the implications of them. We're hoping that we will know more information by early summer for next year. So at the very least, we can monitor these levers and infuse them into our plans and revise our plans to best prepare for August. So there's a variety of things that we wanted to make sure we talked with the board about that are being monitored daily, weekly, with meetings with various groups to make sure that we are abreast of what's going on and what's going to be required of schools in August. Okay. I want to shift to differentials and stipends because that's also a part of our staffing plan. As you know, we bring that information to the board every year. We did take a look at a 3-year look back with Mr. Rollman, our athletic and activities director this year. There were a variety of things that were discussed and requested by, I know we had a staff member request winter percussion. Mr. Rollman was looking at wrestling, dance, lacrosse, and soccer. And then we also had a request for a CTE grants coordinator. With everything going on with the uncertainties of COVID and all the different guidance for IHSA, et cetera, we are looking at not changing any of our differentials or stipends at this point in time, and with the exception of the CTE grants coordinator. So I want to talk real quick about that because it's not an activity and it's not an athletic, but it is a stipend. It's the same kind of stipend, it's in a different part of the contract with KEA, but it's a similar stipend to team leaders, department chairs, and more specifically, the driver's ed coordinator. So similarly to the CTE grants coordinator, we have someone who does additional work outside of department chair duties, et cetera, to orchestrate all the behind-the-wheel work that we do. We also have our current CTE department chair doing a ton of extra work for grants, for CTE grants, about $70,000 worth of grants. They do all the preparation for them, the dispersing of them, procuring items, tracking them, attending all the required meetings for learning of the new guidance each year for the grants to make sure that our CTE programs can run. And so the person who does that proposed having a separate stipend for all that work that's done for a CTE grants coordinator. And when we looked at it and talked the high school administration with the business office, it is something that's needed because this person does do a significant amount of additional work above and beyond what anybody else would do. And then that $2,100 represents 3% of the brought-in $70,000 grants. That's kind of an industry standard for what a grant writer would get in terms of these kinds of dollars. So we are asking that we approve a CTE grants coordinator for next year. Okay. This next chart kind of puts it all into one spot. So you can see that we have an increase of PE and health, an increase of social studies, an increase of social work. We have an offset due to reduction in force and reassignment. We have the grants coordinator. All in, we're looking at that 0.7 FTE and the grants coordinator, and that comes out to about $44,100 of staffing charges, plus then the contingency component that we talked about at the $725,000. We don't have an FTE for that contingency, but as we know what that might be, if that's needed, that would come back to the board. But then that adding in that $725,000, we're looking at $769,100 of expense. So that just kind of puts it all into a chart with FTE in dollars.
Question.
Yes.
Who benefits from this grant coordinator?
All of our
what
students that
he or
take
she do?
CTE.
Huh?
All of our students that take CTE classes.
Personal finance is a requirement to graduate. Is that the one you're referring to? And then others.
That covers everything from drafting and small engines to personal finance to some of our work release programs, you name it.
And this falls in the same category?
Some of what I'm not quite.
The category, well, you usually present athletics in a sense.
Right. It's a differential in stipend. It's a stipend by definition, but it's not a coaching stipend or an activity stipend. So it is something that we'd want the board to approve, but it is not a sport and it is not an activity.
Because if I recall last year, one of the things that were slated for this year was the head coach for lacrosse team.
Slated how?
Slated that they were next in line to potentially come in and be authorized for payment. Because right now I think it's paid through, I assume, the parents and the fees.
The board never agreed to that.
Yeah, we didn't do that.
The lacrosse coach is unpaid.
And we
discussed
presented it.
last year.
We presented lacrosse last year and this year as something to keep on your radar as a board.
We did not authorize to come here this year, and I agree with that.
Okay.
Yes, I understand that. But there was also, but yes.
We did
Obviously,
discuss it.
I know we discussed it, but.
Yeah, we've talked
but
about a lot of
At the end of the
it.
day, the recommendation comes to after they vet it. But they vetted it, and this is what they want. So I'm good.
Okay.
If you can go to the next one, Mr. Rowley.
Real quick, Dr. Atkins, while you're advancing, these stipends and differential positions, aren't they put together by a committee that's made up of administrators, KEA, et cetera, et cetera?
A committee of administrators, EC 12. If there is one that is presented, then it goes to KEA, to a committee with KEA to set the rate.
Thank you. I knew that they were involved. I couldn't remember how the process worked. Thank you.
Similar to sharing information about those athletics that we just want you to know are out there, they're burgeoning, they're up and coming, and we may need to address in future years. We also wanted to share a comprehensive list of additional staffing items that the administration would want to make sure you're aware of. These are not being asked for at this time, but we do want the board to know that they are being discussed and are out there as future considerations. Additional social workers to support our students' needs, behavior specialists to support those social and emotional needs, additional school counselors to potentially support 504 students. We have a burgeoning 504 student population, and we would potentially be in need of specific counselors for that in the future. Additional secretarial support for the athletic department, ed services department, and the buildings and grounds department. Additional maintenance employees to support our infrastructure. Behavior transition assistance to support students integrating into mainstream classes. Full-time assistant principals at the elementary school. Increase of contract days for the special education coordinator, deans, and the assistant principals at the high school and middle school. Site-based full-time substitutes, and additional special education staff for the elementary co-teaching program. So again, these are not things we're asking for tonight. These are things that we want the board to know are being discussed as potential needs in the coming years in our district.
Dr. Atkins, just to clarify, when you're saying support social emotional needs, does that mean just supporting the students directly with social emotional support, or are we also talking about supporting the teachers who are currently and in the future implementing more social emotional learning curriculum?
These would be for student-driven needs.
Okay.
Correct.
So will we need other support systems then for those teachers who are using those SEL curricular kind of goals?
I think we're going to be looking at, with our rollout, for example, with the homeroom committee and such, we'll be looking at professional development with and for our staff to support with those things. But as far as a social worker, that would be a student-driven need.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks for helping me clarify.
Yep, no problem.
Are there any additional supports that you think might be needed next year, just academically? I don't know if it's, there'll be more of a need for middle school math help in some way, or, I'm just throwing something out there. Is that something that's going to be evaluated this summer, or how does that look? Or is that something that you think can be handled in the classroom? I know this is minimum and it wouldn't be in this anyways, but I'm just kind of wondering where your head's at with those types of different needs for next year, different structure.
If you're talking about like our MTSS supports,
If you just think you'll need more next year than you have in the past, if that's the right structure to go with, like in addition to just the COVID need contingency that you talked about, is there anything else?
if
5
you're
days a week, everyone's here.
if you're asking the HR guy if we should have more teachers, yes.
Yeah, no. But I
No, I
wondered
don't
if there
think
was,
silly.
is there data that you're going to look at this summer, as you brought
Yes.
some information?
Yes.
Yeah, we're going
Thank
to
you.
continue to evaluate throughout the rest of the school year, see how the tutoring program goes, and then see where we are at the end of the school year assessments. And then from there, if there are other contingencies that are needed, we would bring that to the board.
Absolutely.
Or the positions.
You said better than me.
Yeah.
Just so I understand your thinking, so we find out the kids all come back to school next year and little Susie's behind in math, we need more RTI staff in order to catch kids up. Is that kind of what you were thinking, Shauna, or asking?
And I think what Dr. Layton said is that hope is that they'll be looking over the summer, maybe reevaluate in the fall, to your point, because it will change those data points, but just curious what the summer work was for that.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily want to pinpoint it, that would be RTI, but it would be services somehow provided to our students.
Just an example. I
Yes.
wasn't trying to pin you to anything.
No, that's fine.
Well, I think the tutoring will be a good indicator too, right? We might be able to expand that program, or there's lots of options, I would think, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it would determine too, after assessing how many students avail themselves to summer school, how many go to summer school, how they're doing coming out of summer school, then reassess their grade level readiness or subject or standard readiness to then determine what might be needed for the fall to continue moving forward.
Sure.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm still gonna come back at the grant thing. It just seems odd being here for me. So I got a couple questions. Usually when there's a program they want to introduce as a stipend, I'll just pick one of the sports ones, whatever it may be, or a club. You ask them to support themselves for 2, 3, 4 years, whatever, prove that there is student involvement and whatever, and then they can apply and you guys vet it, and then you come to us and yeah, they should get it. How does that fall into that picture?
I think there's one difference, that this is not a student component like a club or an athletic where there's kids coming and participating. The kids come into play in that this is part of, these are the resources that we have for their classes, for their CTE coursework. And the grants coordinator has been pulling in these grant dollars for, oh gosh, I'm looking at Dr. Fuchs.
20, 30 years, I mean, it's.
Right. It's
many
been
years.
something that as CTE as a department continues to grow, as we have more kids pursuing career and technical ed, the needs have been increasing. And what was a maybe smaller grant 20, 30 years ago has now become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And for each dollar that comes in, there's requesting, procuring, monitoring, accounts payable, and this person monitors all that. They do all that. Plus then there's regulatory components where there are seminars and things that the grants coordinator has to attend for all the new revised federal mandate stuff, the rules and regs that they then have to follow to get those dollars. And we have programming that relies on those dollars to provide that CTE experience to some of our students. And so it impacts students through the coursework. It's not necessarily, I guess, there's no CTE club. Well, maybe there is. No CTE club. But these dollars directly support our students. And it's a very large task. And as far as that longevity of showing that that need is there and that that work gets done, 2 or 3 decades.
This sounds like, do we get help from the ROE on this?
No, these grants are through Valley's. So currently, the department chair for CTE does this work, but she is a department chair just like all other department chairs. But in this particular department, there's a significant amount of extra work that's being asked of her for no additional dollars. And so the stipend is to help to compensate her for that extra work above and beyond the work of a typical department chair to manage these grants. Truly, it will help the business office because that way there can be the expectation to meet all the deadlines and complete the forms and to really work with us, and she'll be compensated for that extra time.
I don't doubt the benefit. The way it's coming in, there's something, it just doesn't jive with me. Sorry.
Yeah, it's coming in because it's a stipend, and it's one that the board is authorizing us to use district dollars to pay for.
Okay, I get it. I get that. I mean, the avenue, it just doesn't, to me, it just doesn't fit right in there, but that's okay.
It's been a long time since we've had to add anything like this.
Are you okay?
There's just a lot of feedback happening.
The feedback. Any other questions?
Of that 700 we approved last year, wasn't quite a bit of that money used for cleaning costs?
No, none of that money was used for
Thank
cleaning
you.
costs.
Okay.
But we've used about 680,000 of the 725 this year. And then when we approved the tutoring, that pretty much brought us up to the maximum, a little bit over.
Okay.
And the 725 was truly staffing. Other materials and supplies were different dollars.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. So for me, at least, I think it's a no for the
Contingency.
The contingency. Thank you. But if someone else wants to, I think there might be a majority to support this. So if someone's comfortable with approving the minimum staffing plan for certified staff for 2021-22 as presented. Oh, go ahead.
You confused me.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just stating my no vote, but I didn't want to.
All right, I thought you were going to rephrase the.
I didn't want.
I'm completely in favor of the staffing plan. I will not vote to approve the contingency.
I'm guessing that's just the two of us, so whoever wants to make a
So
motion.
change it up.
I'm with you. Sorry.
We're on board. So I would
Okay.
like to make a motion that the board approves the district minimum staffing plan for certified staff for 2021 with the exception of the contingency funds.
Second.
Any discussion? And a roll call.
Is it better to say at the 41,000 level rather than say without the contingency, just for clarity?
Are you guys fine with that?
Does anybody have
Yes, you two.
preference?
The motion,
It
41,000.
accomplishes the same thing. I don't.
Okay.
Okay. One question?
Yeah,
Todd,
44.
at what
Sorry,
point in
44.
time last year, or this year, whenever, last year, I guess, did you come to us, or we authorized the 725? Was that the beginning of the year? Right
was
after
over
we
the summer.
It
started?
would have been the summer. It was either May or June as the guidance changed. I can't remember
Alright, so-
which.
so we still
which
have
ordinance.
time.
It was after the 4th of July, I recall.
I'm sorry?
It was after the 4th of July.
Okay, so you still got
believe.
time. Okay, cool.
All right, any more discussion? And a roll call.
Mrs. Pavlik,
Aye.
Mr. Rivas,
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber,
Aye.
Mrs. Witt,
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
My hesitation is, could you just read the motion back to me and make sure, because I just want to make sure I'm right.
That the Kaneland Board of Education approve the minimum staffing plan for certificated staff for the 2021-2022 school year as presented, with the exception of the COVID contingency of $725,000.
Thank you. Aye.
And Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Dr.
Motion carried.
Lawler.
Pardon me? I'm sorry.
That's all right.
You didn't get to vote.
I don't need to vote.
You don't need to vote. Motion carries 7-0.
Can I just make a comment that I would love to see that contingency plan as soon as possible? Just as my preference.
And J3 fuel tank update.
Yes, if you recall, as Dr. Fuchs brings potential bids to the board throughout the winter and the spring, one of the topics that has come up a few times is the gas bid and a fuel tank process, whether we want to buy the fuel tanks, rent the fuel tanks. And so Dr. Fuchs has done a little more research, and I'll turn it over to her and she can provide a full update.
Great, thank you. The district currently has 3 fuel tanks on its property at the high school, and Conserve FS is responsible for maintaining them because they own those tanks. The issue with them owning the tanks is other vendors have reluctantly contributed bids when it's time. In the past, sometimes they have, and most recently, they've declined to do so. We have one 2,500-gallon tank and 2 500-gallon tanks, and you can see on the board report the approximate amount of fuel that we use each year. We have bid it a number of ways. Every year when I have bid it, we put the tank rental on the bid docs, but they never complete that section. So I'm assuming then that they're building in the tank rental portion of it into the cost of the fuel. So I talked to the 2 vendors that most recently bid on our fuel. I got a range that they do build it into the price of the fuel, somewhere between 5 and 20 cents. I've asked Conserve, may we buy the existing tanks that are on the property? And if so, how much would that cost? And I've also asked Mr. Payton, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, to get me a price on what new tanks would cost. Conserve is willing to sell us the tanks that are on the property currently for $15,274. If we wanted to buy new tanks, they would be approximately $25,000. Given the 5 cents and the 20 cents, it would take somewhere between, on the low end, 3 to 4 years to recover the cost of the purchase of the tanks. On the high end, it would be within 1 year's purchase. That's due to the savings. So my recommendation this evening is that the board direct the administration to purchase the existing fuel tanks from Conserve at the price of $15,274. And then each year when I bring the spring bids, we put the fuel back on the bid list, and we should be able to get some competitive bids. I don't know that we will, but we should be able to. And let me think, I wanted to tell you one other thing. It's all right. So that's my recommendation at this point.
Thank you. You
All
just
right.
got, good.
So how old are these tanks right now?
Yep, thank you. That's great lead-in. The big tank, the 2,500 gallon, is just a 1 year. They just replaced it not too long ago. And then the two 500 gallons are somewhere around 10 to 12 years old.
I wouldn't want to buy those. But anyway, the other thing is, how often are they maintained?
About every 3 to 5 years, they'll come in and paint them. Whenever the pumps get old or corroded and things like that, they'll replace them. I would say that's maybe once every other year, something like that.
All right, so they own them, they replace them, do their maintenance. How much was that going to cost us?
The painting isn't much, and the
Right.
parts aren't very much. So
But
it should be
someone's got to
okay.
do it, though.
Correct. Our maintenance department will do it.
Oh, we can?
Yes, we can
change
maintain.
the pumps and the whole works?
So we can, but in the event that we can't, we would have to purchase that service from one of the vendors
Is
that's
that something we have to
servicing
get certified on?
No,
us. No.
No?
I've done it.
You what?
There you go.
I said I've done it, it's not that hard.
They're pretty simple pieces right now. It's not really, our maintenance department should be able to do most of the work.
So the 15,000 you gave us is for all 3 tanks?
Yes, it is.
And the 25,000 is for all 3 tanks as well?
Yes, it is.
I would, if we're gonna go in the business of tanks, I'd rather get them all new. I don't know about you guys.
What's the lifespan?
You know what, Teresa, I'm not sure, but I would say maybe 15 years.
So we got
Right
2
there.
that are 10, and we got 5 years on each one, maybe?
They are the smaller of the two, or of the 3. They're 2 500-gallon ones, and then the larger one is the brand, it's just a year old, and it's 2,500 gallons. It's for the diesel.
Now, I didn't do the math, but you said 5 to 20 cents additional. That we went, did you do the math of potential savings? Which is what?
It ranges between 6,780 and 27,120, the savings.
And then, just so I'm clear on your recommendation is to buy the tanks that we have now and then put the fuel out to bid this year.
That is correct.
Okay, I read it twice and I wasn't positive, but I
The
don't care if we,
recommendation is to purchase the existing fuel tanks from Conserve and put the fuel out to bid on an annual basis.
starting with, okay, just making sure I'm on, that's fine. I don't care if we buy 1-year-old or if we get the all-new tanks or keep the 1-year-old and thank you for doing the work. Let's buy some tanks and have our own fuel.
Any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education direct the administration to purchase the existing fuel tanks from Conserve FS, Inc. at the price of $15,274 and put the fuel out to bid on an annual basis.
So moved.
In a second? Nope.
Question, everybody's cool with?
Here, can we get
Fine.
do we mind getting a second? There's a motion.
Second.
Second, go.
Sorry. Are we okay buying those 2 old tanks?
If that's what Dr. Fuchs recommends.
I would tell you there's nothing wrong with the tanks. At the point that something's wrong with them, we can replace them at that time. That's why we replaced the other one, is it started to leak, and so we got rid of it. They gave us a new one last year.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with the existing ones. So that's why I'm recommending it.
Okay. I just,
Any other discussion? And a roll call.
Mr. Rivas.
sure.
Is that a sure?
Yes. Sorry.
Mrs. Barber.
Not convincing, is it?
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to Superintendent Board report.
Yep, a few important updates. The first one, as you know, we've shared and talked about a little bit this week, is the second round of the Kane County offered Moderna vaccine for education workers as part of Phase 1B. We do have a number of staff that will be availing themselves of that opportunity this week. And just as a reminder, we will be monitoring the absences for staff and teachers Tuesday and Wednesday, and then based on that, we will determine, hopefully able to fully operate with staff and transportation and food service on Thursday and Friday. But if for some reason, excuse me, the second round causes more absences than the first one did, we would react accordingly and make our plans accordingly. And then we would use the emergency days, and that way the 2 days would be added to the end of the school year to make sure we have those 2 additional days with staff as opposed to asynchronous or another plan. All the plans could work fine, but we wanted to make sure that we had the days with students in school if needed. But again, hopefully it's not, excuse me, not needed at all. The next thing we are starting to review now as House Bill 2170 was signed. It was a omnibus education package that has multiple ramifications for schools. So we're looking into that to see exactly what we need to be doing immediately. There are some things that are immediate timelines for implementation in July, and other ones are for the 23-24 school year and everywhere in between. So we'll look at those and then determine where they need to go into a curriculum or into staffing. And as you recall, annually the Regional Office of Education comes out and does a compliance visit to look at our curriculum, to look at our programming, make sure that we have our handbooks and everything updated. And my guess is any of the new changes that we'll see in House Bill 2170 would be represented in the ROE compliance visit when they come and check. Another important item that you've probably seen and read about are the student assessments, state and national assessments that are required heavy into the spring of each school year. This year, a number of superintendents banded together to communicate with State Superintendent Carmen Ayala to let her know that due to this school year and the number of days that have been missed, the number of days that have been outside of a regular school year, that we would request to have some of the assessments, if possible, pushed off to next year and be able to have as many regular school days this year as possible. And so we do have that survey that we have filled out, and we'll find out in the next, I think it's March 15th, what the final timeline will be for those assessments moving forward.
Dr. Lathan, how would that impact our seniors?
Seniors, fortunately, the majority of
I'm sorry, juniors. I'm thinking the wrong group, right?
The juniors had, as far as the SAT, had an opportunity in the fall to take that test.
Okay.
And there will still be other opportunities in the spring in which they want to take it individually if they want to.
Okay, so there is a little bit of flexibility still
Yes.
to take it. Okay. Okay.
Yep, and then a number of the other tests, they're still trying to figure out the exact timeline and dates and what level to give them where, because there's some 8th grade tests and there's some freshman tests. So do they still give the same test to freshmen that they would have taken spring of 8th grade, or do they move it up up one level to a different test? But those are the things that the state and the test holders will decide and let us know.
Okay.
Okay. Another important topic that, as I think Board Member Witt shared, we will be receiving, or should be, the state, the $5 billion as part of the COVID-19 relief package. Again, just recently signed. We don't know what the exact impact is going to be for Kaneland, where and when, and how those dollars need to be utilized. But as soon as we do receive those, we'll be sure to make sure we provide updates. And then also, as you know, weekly, 1 o'clock on Mondays, the time is really not important because it varies based on meetings, but on Mondays we do meet with the King County Health Department, and we did receive some news of some new guidance, and that guidance is in regard to outdoor capacity, which is now moved to 20%. I think part of the reason is as schools and districts and universities are starting to look towards graduation, looking for outdoor events, that now can be at 20% of the capacity of that building or that environment. And again, we just learned that today. And along with that, we also did hear that they're hoping by the end of the week to have new guidance that would be directly related to student returning to school. So I don't know if it's something that's going to change for this year. I don't know if it's guidance for next year, but they did say they believe it is something that would be helpful for students for planning, or helpful for districts for student planning, for students to return to school. So that's as detailed as they got on that. So it's fairly cryptic with a timeline that we've also been waiting for 2 weeks now as they've been sharing that. So the sooner we can get that information, the sooner we can start both short-term or finalize short-term planning, but then also start our long-term planning for next year.
Did they indicate, is it guided by some new research or new findings, or?
They didn't say that piece.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
How did you say this week or next week, or you said soon?
They said they hoped by the end of the week.
Okay.
As far as any of the other student return guidance or any other school guidance.
Okay.
And they didn't say if it was specific just to public schools or universities or any other impacts. They just know that we've been asking for it regularly, asking them for any guidance and direction. And so I think that they seem to be happy that they have finalized it, and then we'll be sharing it with us soon. And we'll be glad to have that too.
You said it was 20% capacity of outdoor spaces?
Yes.
Go back to that.
That seems, isn't that what the ball clubs just did today?
I'm sorry, what?
I heard the news that the Cubs and Sox are allowing, I thought it was 20% capacity, so it just seems oddly coincidental that that's the magic number that they picked.
Probably consistent statewide.
Okay.
So is that 20% of capacity for a place that's outdoor, but it is an actual venue, not like a park that technically doesn't have a capacity? Are there, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do understand. And what the helpful piece is generally when that guidance comes out, there's a series of bullet points that follow with more direct guidance. But also, please note too that when we've received other guidance, like in the summer, when there was immediate feedback, sometimes it goes back for revision and it changes and it's come back to us. So just know that we will look at it immediately, see what the impact for us will be for the multiple scenarios. And then if it does change, well, then just make sure that we provide those updates too. A couple more things. Kane County, based on what they shared today, is now at 8% of fully vaccinated. I think the last board meeting I shared, I think it was maybe 3.5%. And they did say that the last 2 days or last 2 or 3 days or vaccination schedules that they had were the most beneficial days that they've had so far. The highest number of vaccinations, which is great. We met last Friday, a couple of superintendents and myself, to try to get more information, to try to find out what's going on with the state. Met with State Senator Karina Villa and had some conversations with her about these very topics, House Bill 2170, assessments, COVID relief, and then also student return to school conversations. And so she now will regularly be in touch with us and will give us one extra avenue which to communicate with to try to see if we can expedite any of the details or information that we're looking for on various topics. We do have another meeting based on the guidance that hopefully we're going to receive scheduled for the end of the week to be able to meet with the health department again, receive that information, and then do our best to interpret it as fast as we can to see what impacts it then has for schools. So again, that's they've shared information with us with timelines. Many times they've kept it. Sometimes they've been a little later, rarely earlier, but we will share it as we learn any of that. That guidance will, again, then help us moving forward. So just wanted to share those updates and see if you had questions on any of those topics.
Not yet.
Ask me Friday?
But, yeah.
I said ask me Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I'm sorry, go ahead and finish. I was going to move on to something else.
No, I was just going to, I know that.
To Dr. Fuchs, or
Yeah.
we want to go to Dr. Fuchs, or you still with Dr. Layden?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Dr. Layden,
I was on topics for future agendas.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we still have Julie Hen as a superintendent
sorry.
update
Go ahead.
report.
Aaron?
Sure. Okay. The meeting you're gonna have on Friday, is that gonna be able to, are you gonna be able to get that information into the weekly update? That seems like it'd be cutting it close.
Depends on when the state provides that guidance. Once the state provides the guidance, I'll make sure I provide the updates as soon as I can.
Okay.
Yep.
We might be talking.
Yes.
Sounds good.
I know this was kind of asked last time, and since then, you've reflected and wanted to do more. If they come out Friday and say 3 feet, 0, whatever, are we able to pivot this year and make that happen?
That will be based on the information that we learn, based on the preliminary plans that we've put together to assess those kinds of questions. My recommendation would be that we would have to look at that, determine that, and then bring that to the board for conversation. So we could, yes, we could conceivably create, we have the plans, we could put them in place, but because of the plans, there would be infrastructure, there would be financial, there would be implications that the board would see, that would need to hear from us for approval of any recommendations that we have.
And knowing that over the next month, we only meet once, if that came out, we would look at a special meeting.
Yes, we could do that for sure.
Any other? Go ahead, Dr. Fuchs. Oh, okay, go
Let
ahead.
her go. I'll come back.
I have 2 updates tonight. I haven't talked to you for a little while about solar, so I wanted to let you know where we're at. Harder Middle School and Kaneland John Shields, the primary construction is complete at this time, but those 2 schools are on the same application with Stewart. So before we get it started, they have to wait for Stewart to be completed. Once all 3 schools are completed, then they can, they're doing the paperwork and the verification for energization. Sorry about that.
You mean turn it on?
Energization, so that, to turn it on. Exactly. Sorry.
That's fine.
At John Stewart, though, we have 5 more weeks of primary construction, so it'll be a little while. At the high school, we have 3 more weeks of primary construction, and then both of those buildings will be in the engineering verification phase before we turn it on.
Cool.
So we're getting there
Great
soon.
news. Great news.
The second thing is the Kaneland High School Facility Planning Committee met last week, and they did see the initial cost estimates along with a variety of options for stadium placement, and it is getting very exciting. The Kaneland High School staff is scheduled to see the information and hear the information on March 17th, and then we're looking forward to bringing information to the board probably in early May, once the transition has taken place. So we're getting there. It's coming along well, but it's expensive.
All right, any board reports?
Not a report, but I want to add, when I saw the 20% was, and I think it was a Chronicle or somebody put out an ad saying that a lot of our students are going to be able to participate at the state level, which before it wasn't. So being an advocate of sports people, I'd love to see our students be able to
Yeah, I think the
take advantage.
IHSA also, as the guidelines are presented or shifted or changed, I think there's the immediate feedback then of whether it's the Cubs or the White Sox or IHSA, and those kinds of changes are then follow up quickly. So I do know that when the IHSA, which governs athletics and athletics in the state of Illinois, once they get that new information, they meet right away and provide updates. So
But
we will.
before, right, they had not, they said you can participate in the sports, but there won't be any championships, if you will. And that's what I got out of that, additionally.
In the fall, that's what they had, and I think that was their initial plan for the spring, but based on any guidance that they have, I know they're trying to make it as much of a meaningful season with tournaments to the greatest extent possible. So we'll have to see which state events that they allow to have or which ones they don't. But
They listed them.
But they are listening, and again,
They
we will
listen.
follow that guidance. If they do allow it, and it's safe in which to do so, our students will participate in those.
Any other board reports? Topic for future agendas, assume.
Yeah, and I don't expect you to have the answer to this one, but I would like to know at some point. Along the way, they mentioned the strategic plan, and that's, with valid reason, been kind of pushed by the wayside, but I'd like to know when that's coming back around.
Okay.
At the last meeting, we discussed, sorry.
I'm sorry, stop on that.
Thumbs up.
Go ahead, you're right.
Is that just, you want a date, or is there something you want? Do we need
Tell me
thumbs up,
something.
Thumbs down, Friday
I mean,
update?
Tell me when you're gonna tell me.
Was what you were gonna say the same thing, or are you
No.
going, do you have a list of things?
I have a list.
So we're stopping there. Do we have direction, or if it's just a date, but you just want to kind of an update on
Just
timing?
tell me when you're gonna tell me.
I give you an overview of the next steps.
Okay.
I'll provide an overview.
All right, we're all good with that? All right, I'm sorry.
You have
continue.
another one? Okay.
Yes, in the last board meeting, we talked about the number of students that aren't doing so well, and I'd like to know when we're going to get a report on how the progression is coming along.
I don't know if Dr. Mum or Patrick, do you want to give an update on the exact timing of when, because I know when trimesters and quarters end, how long it takes to compile the information and then provide an update?
Sure. So at the middle school and high school, the quarter term ends on March 12th. So we'll be able to pull the middle school grades at that time, and then we can work with administration of the high school to see progress reports where we're at. But the official grades for the high school won't come in until the end of the semester. But we can see if there's a data point at the high school for that. But the March 12th is the end of the term here for the middle school, so we'll have updated letter grades, report card grades for that. And then the iReady testing that we reported back out on last meeting, that benchmark is slated for an April window where we'll have kids take that for the third time in the year.
Patrick, will that be the same students taking the test again? The same?
Yes.
Sample, okay. Yep.
Okay, I heard you, but I didn't hear an answer of when we're getting an update to the board.
Well, I think, what do you want from that data? What do you want, I guess, what are you proposing to the board?
I want to see that the students are doing better, and if they're not, I want the explanation it's more information of how we're progressing.
So after Q3? We have to have time for them to get there.
Right, no, I agree. We need to give them the time to be able to process the information and provide it, but I want to know when it's getting provided.
So you're asking probably Q3 high school and
Specifically the students that were failing. I want to see that number
and
is.
semester, or trimester 2? Is that, and that's finished, right?
Just finished.
Yeah. Do you need, I know, yeah, does that clear to the board what their thumbs up and thumbs down?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
If I need a clarification, I can ask.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just have another topic.
Oh, go ahead.
Are we ready?
Go ahead, I'm done.
I would like to request that we talk about extended day kindergarten fees.
Okay.
I don't know if other people want to talk about that.
Is that thumbs up, thumbs down?
Sure. Yes, please.
Yes, please, there you said, okay.
Okay.
Any other topics?
I do. I know that the April meeting is scheduled to have the SEL presentation. I'm wondering, I guess I'm wondering out loud, a few things. One, are we going to be able to jam everything into that presentation? Because I feel like that presentation is going to start getting bigger and bigger as we have more SEL concerns to address. And as we're dealing with other shifts that might be happening because of what we're looking for from Kane County Health and all these things, are we going to be able to address it in a satisfactory way, right? Because I know some of us are concerned about the bullying, some of us are concerned about the social emotional learning supports. I'm concerned about what we do for our most vulnerable populations, like the LGBTQ community, and so there's a lot of pieces to go into that presentation. Do we have room for all that in one meeting?
Are all those aspects typically covered in the SEL?
Yeah, I know that at the last presentation was more, back at the beginning of the school year, was heavy in just the discipline piece, and I know that the board was interested in hearing expanded past that to other supports and vulnerable populations. So I do have that noted to bring back and to highlight as far as which board meeting based on other information that might be coming.
Yeah.
I know that April was when we said it was going to come.
Right.
Happy to bring it in April and put it together. But if you'd like, we can monitor other topics that are coming up, the length of meetings, other agenda, and then I can communicate accordingly and slot it in at the meeting that feels most appropriate.
Okay. I was just thinking we might want to have some flexibility with that, right? Because it is a growing piece, right? At one point, it was a very small thing, right? And it continues to grow at least the 4 years I've been here. So it keeps to grow, so.
So you don't want to cut it short?
I don't want to cut it short. I think it's a very important piece, probably more so than ever before.
As part of that, I know I had asked about the Title IX implications of some of the executive orders and things that have gone into place, and I don't know if that would tie in the LGBTQ plus conversation with, so I don't know if there's a thumbs up, thumbs down, or if that's a direct, if both of those are just directions for what they want to hear in SEL.
I'm not sure that those are the same thing. But
I think the vulnerable populations, the LGBTQIA plus information would, and Title IX changes that will allow for, I mean, it's not bullying. It's not bullying.
You know me, I'll talk about anything, but I just wasn't sure that Title IX fit with social emotional. That's where I wasn't seeing the connection you were drawing.
Okay, no, I think I was understanding that we might have to segregate out some of the discussion and.
I would be fine with that, because I don't want to cut anything short, right? So my personal preference would be, if we can't do it in one meeting, then maybe we have to do it in two, or we have to give a meeting and cut the, make sure the agenda doesn't have 5 or 6 things that we have to address that night, right? So
and they don't have to be together. I mean,
my feelings on it.
I just don't want the Title IX discussion to be, or it can be an update.
Well, I think what we'd like to do is to bring that topic, the SEL topic at one time, wrap it in together, because if it's two different meetings or 2 different topics, then we may lose some of the conversation. Sure. But if we do it at one time at the board meeting, that would be most appropriate, then that way we can get feedback on the exact presentation, because I know there was some feedback from the last one of some shifts or some things that you're looking for differently. Sure. And to have it at one time would be most helpful, to put it together and then also to gather the feedback, then to shift it and adjust it for future presentations also.
Well, Teresa, you said maybe some of it comes back in an update. That would be reasonable to me too, I think, right? So, some of these pieces might not need to be a full-on discussion. So I would defer to the administration's judgment on that.
Thank you.
Are we good with all that?
Sure.
All right, any other topics? No? All right, seeing none, we will move on to public comments with the same rules as before.
Did you get a fresh sheet?
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Did you get a fresh sheet?
Do I get what?
Did you get a fresh sheet?
Yes, well, Dr. Atkins gave me one, thank you.
All right.
Or someone brought it up, I shouldn't even,
Dr.
it got
Atkins brought it
passed,
up.
I think. It was notes in school. Thank you. All right, Rachel Rockwell.
I want to thank Meg Junk for mentioning the ability for the district to have a quick response if the recommendations come in differently by Friday, if everybody's ready to respond and get everything back up and going. I think that was an important thing to mention to everybody here tonight. I'm going to finish off where I left off. I know it's broken up, but I understand the process, and 3 minutes is what everybody gets, so I'm going to finish up. The concept that we all work together in order to meet the needs for all to get the greatest outcome or the best return on your investment, by which the community give our teachers fair wages with benefits for life and work protection. We in return expect our children to be prepared for their individual lives through their education. The obstacle that continues to stand in this and the administration is the administration and the teachers union. The two work together, sometimes more focused in their business relationship rather than what is best for our children. The current state of the world has left this position of the district in a difficult position. I understand that and can even say I'm grateful for the school will now be offering tutoring, but being able to make accommodations for the spring, even for just the upperclassmen to return full-time, seems odd. At a minimum, the juniors and seniors should have access to that middle school that's sitting there empty. Throughout the entirety of COVID, the private schools who barely have any funding prospered and immediately accommodating to the rapid change. My youngest was in 8th grade at Harder when this started, and my middle child was a senior at Rosary High School. The private sector has had their education handled perfectly within a month of time of the world shutting down. I'm fortunate to be able to afford a private school, but getting proper education and those who oversee it to make decisions for the betterment of this district should not be reliant upon dollars. If money were not a problem, and each and every member of this community received a survey, I wonder what the results would look like if the only question it asked was, if you were to receive a voucher to go anywhere else, would you take it? May I make a few recommendations for good faith purposes for those looking for a reciprocated relationship between the community and the district, making full-time accommodations for the upperclassmen after spring break, unless you're able to open full-time, which that is the hope. offer additional tutoring for the seniors to help with resumes, counseling, or other support that they may need in order to begin the next chapter of their lives, a possible reimbursement for the portion of kindergarten, waiving next year's school fees as most families within the village have had to make financial sacrifices, but congruently, the district needs to be able to do what they need to do. So in fairness, having parents sign a waiver, releasing the district of any responsibility should a child catch COVID, and for asynchronous classes to be successful, parents are going to have to understand that any interjection during class time will be reprimanded through their child possibly being limited to e-learning only. It is imperative that the village and the district work together to have a successful future and that they both have an equally beneficial relationship. We want our teachers and our district to succeed, so when the contract is up for renegotiation, this time period will not impediment a quick resolution. Thank you for your time.
Chris Bateman.
All right, my apologies if I came across a little hostile before. I didn't get to finish. So over the last couple of weeks, I've had the opportunity to speak with superintendents and school members across several different districts, both within Kane County and outside of Kane County. And what's interesting to me is they've been more than willing to answer my questions and have a conversation with me and explain exactly what it is they're going through, more so than I've gotten from my own district. Some of the things that I've been able to determine from this, Community Consolidated School District 89 is using the exact same language to constitute bringing their kids back to school that we're using to keep our kids out of school. And that is with the guidance stating of using 6 feet of distance to the greatest extent possible if other mitigation is in place. They've also cited the American Academy of Pediatrics, which recommends desks may be less than 6 feet apart if the school is using other layers of mitigation. So what other data points are we looking at outside of just the guidance of 6 feet? I've yet to get an answer on that. Also, one of our sister districts, 300 in Kane County, is going back to school on a full-time schedule. Some of the things that the superintendent up there wrote back to me after asking him several questions, and I asked him if he could reach out to Dr. Layden to go through some of these details in the way that he did with me. Their teachers deliver instructions to students who are remote or in person simultaneously each day, which is something that we're not getting right now. They are able to reduce long-term or unnecessary quarantine of students and staff because they applied a CLIA waiver for testing. Is that something that we've explored? And then in regards to their ability to go back, they are going back with an anticipation of 20 students per class. Desks will be spaced 5 to 6 feet apart side by side and roughly 4 feet front to back. So that's a school district in our county following our county guidelines that we have cited as reasons why we can't go back to school. All students will also have tri-fold plexiglass partitions, such as this example right here. Elective special teachers will travel to the classrooms to avoid hallway issues, and all cafeteria seats will have plexiglass partitions. We've also brought another example of a partition that I personally constructed this weekend. It cost me less than $8 and took less than 10 minutes to put together from scratch. I'm just very concerned about why we're not reaching out to these other locations. I'm a nobody to these people. I don't live in their town. My kids don't go to their district, and they're giving me all this information. Think of what you guys could get out of this. These are your partners, right? These are school board members, superintendents in local areas that are willing to help me, a nobody dad, and you who are in charge of our children's education. They're coming up with ideas that I haven't heard anything from you guys. So please reach out and ask for their help, please.
Thank you. Kim Harner.
Hi, I'm Kim Harner. I just had a few closing comments here. I wanted to state that at the last meeting, February 22nd, we had a request for a town hall, and Dr. Layden and you and I had a phone conversation. This past week, and I recommended that you respond to the request for a town hall, and I didn't hear that. So I just wanted to state, and you can clarify if I'm incorrect, but you are declining a request for a town hall. Is that correct?
We don't respond to
Okay,
public
well, I'll tell you.
input.
He said he was declining the request for a town hall at this point. So they did send out a FAQ, and we appreciate that you took that step to try to address the gap in communication. It did feel like a lot of the FAQ responses were kind of just workarounds. It didn't give the exact level of transparency that we would find helpful, okay? For example, buses, right? If that's an obstacle, why haven't we asked parents if they're willing to carpool? You know, teacher staffing, that's an issue, and we just told Dr. Adkins that we're not willing to give him a budget to manage in his discretion to the best of his ability. Dr. Layden, I actually feel bad for you, that this board doesn't want to vote on anything else, and you guys just said that it'll put you in a tough spot if you don't have this discretionary budget to pull the trigger quickly, and then they wanted to vote and said no. I am also a director of HR, and I really feel bad that, first of all, doesn't have a seat up there, and that now we're not giving him the resources to problem solve the needed teachers. It's safe to assume we're going to need teachers. There's a teacher shortage. Are we saying that we're willing to pull the trigger at the last second so we're going to get the last teachers available? Now we're talking about the quality of the candidate pool. You guys didn't want to vote on the plan. Now you're saying that you want an emergency meeting to vote, and I do appreciate that you pushed for that, Ms. Junk. I think that's incredibly helpful. But why are we wanting to all of a sudden vote on all of these things when you were fine with it last year? Why are we throwing up all these hurdles? Mr. Shaw, wherever you are, it's called a test fit. You guys don't know what problem you're trying to solve for. Ask parents. If, let's say, we get to 5 feet, 3 feet, are you in or are you out? It's a weekend problem solve. It's literally called a test fit. None of you can answer any of these questions without knowing the problem you're trying to solve for. Ask people. Are your kids in Geneva District? You don't have to answer that, I believe they are. Geneva put out a survey today and said preliminary, they don't know what the rules are going to be, but hypothetically, if we go to 3 or 5 feet, are you cool with that? They asked hypothetical questions. You probably got this email, and I believe your kids are in that district. Why are we not preliminary putting out hypothetical scenarios? And lastly, we're still doing a wait-and-see approach. The IDPH actually was technically supposed to tell us the revised guidance last Friday. We're waiting another week. It's now 3 weeks since February 22nd. We are still waiting to see.
Thank you. Laura Wilson. Laura Wilson.
Laura Wilson, North Aurora. I'm going to start by actually sharing for a friend of mine that couldn't be here tonight. Let you listen to what she gets to hear. Okay. We could let that keep going. That video continues for 20 seconds. This is a good day, is what she says. 4 days into the packets that are sent home for kindergarten. This is her child. Okay, starting with that. So when I left to come here tonight, I actually had just gotten home from work. My husband had just gotten home from work. We had our child at a babysitter who doesn't have the capacity to be able to finish their homework while they're there. We are probably one of many. 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we're sitting trying to complete this homework with our children, who one is adamantly refusing because she's tired, and we're doing the best we can. Kindergartner, my husband and I are actually looking at each other going, how do we fill this paper out? Kindergarten homework. And I'm well educated. The point of that is we don't get good instruction all the time. Now, with that being said, though, I do want to say that our teachers are absolutely fantastic. The issue with that, though, is on us. When it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, my teachers cannot answer those questions that I need answered. But that's not on them. That's on us, because we don't have the ability to have the children in school. Where's my tracker? So our children did better when they were in Zoom. They had the instruction. They had the teachers actually saying, this is how you want to complete this paper or whatever it may be. So whether it's on Zoom or even if it was an instruction, I think it would be more useful, just because then they're able to actually hear their teachers go to the instruction of what they're talking about in class. We don't always get that. And even for my husband and I, it might help to be able to hear it, because then we can actually direct them through this homework we're being given to teach them. Basically, We do. We just want instruction. We want our children back with the experts. The experts are their teachers. They are not the parents. I cannot say enough how much I appreciate the teachers of Kaneland District and everything that they've had to go through. I know every single one of you has been through a lot as well. It's been quite a year. But it's time. It's time that we have a change. We need to pause. We need to remember. 1 year ago this week is when all of this started. There's not one of us that will not forget what we were doing 1 year ago. All of us have a story to tell. Every single one of us. This is our children's. Something has to change. And if we get the okay to go less than 6 feet, we need to make it happen. We don't need to wait. We need to make it happen.
Thank you. Kim Shaw.
You got it.
Thanks. Tim Shaw, Sugar Grove. Wow. This was even more of a struggle than the first one. iReady data. I know we're waiting for that, but that's going to be garbage. My daughter hasn't done anything since January 4th because it wasn't assigned on the calendar. I tried Googling what should my daughter do today, but it didn't pop up. Everybody, great job to a certain degree. I did want to let you know, Dr. Layden, I apologize.
Yes, Dr. Layden.
We've contacted everybody, right? And again, logic, I mean, that's amazing, by the way, Chris, you did a great job on that. I got to tell you, IDPH, CDC, governor's office, your regional superintendent, they're all pointing their finger at you. They're saying it's you. I want you to know, they are saying it's you. And I know this board votes strictly off of the high level of suggestions that you offer. I'm letting you know this. This is what I'm hearing. I'm letting you know. I'm that guy. But I don't really know what got accomplished here. I mean, I saw a slide for like $720,000 or $70,000 for a dance class and wrestling and all sorts of stuff, and then we all joked about Sox and Cubs and blah, blah, blah. But in the meantime, we have no plan whatsoever for social workers. When I was in Plainfield and that thing ripped through my entire school, they were working tirelessly to mobile classrooms, mobile classrooms. Worked 24-hour shifts to get the old Joliet Catholic building rehabbed, which I'm sure was full of asbestos, heaven forbid. But they managed it because their primary focus was the care of our children, my care. And what did I learn from that? They focused on us. They cared about us. They didn't care about lawsuits. Their job was to make us better, give us that normalcy. And what I'm hearing here is, yeah, okay, we need to work on dance class and wrestling and football and sports are great, but in the meantime, we don't need a social worker to help out the mental health issues. Let's not deal with that right now. Sports are great, but how are these kids going to learn in the future? Are they even going to be around in the future? What are we doing? And that really, everybody's pointing at you, doctor. I don't have a PhD, right? I don't. You know what I do have, though? I saw a shirt once, kind of made me laugh, and I find it so ironically humorous at this point. I don't have a PhD. I have a DD214. That form you get from completion of military service. And one thing that I took away from the United States Marine Corps is a can-do attitude.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Jennifer Shaw. I'm sorry.
Jennifer Shaw with Sugar Grove. I have to say, although it's encouraging to hear some of you mention, actually say the word full-time return to school, like everybody else is saying, I agree with Kim, Rachel, you were point on too, my husband. Why do we keep waiting to put a plan in place to see what we hear from the Kane County Health Department? Everybody here has done their homework. You're not dealing with a bunch of idiots. We're doing our homework. We are taking time to advocate for our children. We have full-time jobs. We're teachers as well. We're raising a family, our house. We are advocating for our children because we don't feel that you are. We have spoken with ISB, everybody, all these governing bodies that you say that are holding us back. Again, pointing to you, pointing to the school district, everything's on you. So, although it's encouraging to hear that, and I appreciate Mrs. Junk, you saying when, lead in when. You're not, last month, I heard numerous times, all of you heard numerous times, I'll have the data next time. I'll have this next time. We don't know. How frustrating is that? As a parent, our tax dollars are going to this and supporting you, and you don't know? Like, shame on you guys, come on. And it says in Illinois.gov, Phase 4 revitalization, like I said last time, what is open? Schools are open. K through 12, pre-K, it's open. So why are we waiting? Sports are playing. Basketball, they have their masks on. I'm sure you played basketball. You can't stand 6 feet apart when you play basketball, can you? I can't. Anybody else? Wrestling. Do we wear masks wrestling? No, right? It says on Illinois.gov, education comes before athletics. Why are we not doing that? Because of 6 feet? Do you know how many children are going to go back to school? Have you asked? We want that data. I think you were maybe trying to get there. We don't have that data. Why are we not talking about that here? I understand there's certain things you need to vote on. Why are we not talking about how we can improve this hybrid plan right now? Why do we not have Wednesdays back every other Wednesday? Why do we not have something more structured? What are you guys, I'm so frustrated. And I want to work with the teachers. I want to work with you, but you are pushing us away and you're giving us a bunch of fluff and it's not working. A lawsuit? I can sue you for not having my kids go back to school. I could sue you for sending them to school and getting hit by the bus. You can get it at any time. How many schools right now are in full-time getting lawsuits? Do you know that statistic? If that's what you're so worried about? Have you asked all the other schools that are back? Get your data. Let's do the work. We are all here to support you, but you're not doing it. So again, we will. We got to do something. This isn't working. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. The Board of Education is scheduled for closed session. There will be no action taken following closed session. Therefore, the vote's going to closed session. We'll conclude the recording of tonight's meeting. Closed session tonight is for Illinois School Code 2C1. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
And a second? Thank you. And a roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk. Aye. Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
And Mr. Rivas.